Welcome to StoryForge Academy. This episode delivers a full academic and narrative autopsy of Wicked. Part 1, 2024, directed by Jon M. It dismantles the illusion of cinematic magic to reveal a story drained of imagination. A film that mistakes spectacle for soul, diversity for decoration, and rebellion for choreography. Short pause, shift tone to analytical. Through the lens of storytelling craft, philosophy, and cultural analysis, this critique exposes how a politically charged novel was turned into a glossy, theme park fantasy. It is not merely a review. It's a dissection of how modern Hollywood neutralizes danger, sanitizes imagination, and replaces meaning with marketable emotion. Slightly slower pace, list mode. Topics explored include the collapse of form and the failure of live-action fantasy, the philosophical misunderstanding of evil, the cultural danger of simplified diversity, the producer's miscalculation and the betrayal of the original novel, and finally, lessons for screenwriters and storytellers. About adaptation, courage, and truth. Pause. Lift energy for closing. A next episode preview. Tomorrow night, we continue this exploration with a brand new critique of Wicked. For Good 2025. The sequel now in theaters. To see whether the second part redeems the sins of the first, or buries them deeper under the glitter. Wicked, Part 1. A fairy tale drowned in its own glitter. Jon M. Wicked. Part 1 is not a film. It's a high-budget Broadway souvenir, an over-polished hallucination where imagination goes to die. Beneath its blinding emerald lights and pop operatic spectacle lies a story so timid, so sanitized, that it seems terrified of the very audience it pretends to inspire. This isn't wickedness. It's cowardice wrapped in confetti. 1. The empty spell of live action. There's a peculiar irony in adapting Wicked. A tale about difference, alienation, and inner transformation through the most risk-averse medium possible. Hollywood realism disguised as fantasy. Chu's world is too clean to feel magical, too calculated to feel alive. Every frame glistens with production value, but not with soul. It's all stage lights, no shadow. You can smell the budget, not the myth. In live action, fantasy needs gravity to soar. Here, it's smothered under digital gloss and endless choreographed sincerity. The result is a 2.5-hour musical that mistakes color for emotion and volume for meaning. 2. A coming-of-age story that never comes of age. Elphaba, the green-skinned outsider, is a symbol of everything Wicked claims to celebrate. Individuality, rebellion, self-acceptance. Yet this film never lets her be truly human. She is a costume, not a character. A metaphor robbed of its mystery. For the teenage audience, the story was meant for roughly ages 11-16. The emotional truth is obvious but flattened. Her transformation feels rehearsed, pre-approved, test screened to death. There is no real risk, no emotional discovery. Just a safe moral lesson delivered through perfectly tuned vocals. In anime, this arc would have been electric. Emotion could morph into imagery. The green could pulse, twist, and evolve. But here, imagination is bound by realism's polite leash. 3. Broadway morality in a gray world. The film's moral structure is binary to the point of parody. Glinda is good. Elphaba is misunderstood. The wizard is corrupt, and every scene screams this with the subtlety of a fire alarm. It's the kind of moral simplicity that might work for children. But the teenage mind thrives on ambiguity, contradiction, and the discovery that good and evil can coexist within one soul. Compare this to Japanese anime, where emotional grayness is treated as sacred ground. In Spirited Away or Attack on Titan, the lines between right and wrong blur until the viewer must feel, not judge. Wicked doesn't blur anything. It underlines it in neon. 3. The death of global imagination. Choose Wicked is not a universal fairy tale. It's a hyper-American artifact, built for Broadway nostalgia, not for global empathy. Every gesture, every vocal crescendo, screams of stage tradition rather than cinematic language. An anime adaptation of Wicked could have transcended geography. It could have turned Elphaba's alienation into visual poetry, her rebellion into abstract motion, her flight into spiritual metaphor. Instead, we get drone shots, CGI bubbles, and musical sincerity so polished it squeaks. This isn't fantasy, it's brand management. 4. A lesson the film itself never learns. The moral of Wicked is that difference is beautiful. The tragedy of Wicked is that the film itself refuses to be different. It worships the formula it should have shattered. It could have been bold, surreal, intimate, even unsettling, but instead it settles for the aesthetic of a theme park parade. Every dollar of its colossal budget is visible, and yet what's missing costs far more: the courage to be strange. Final verdict. Wicked. Part 1 is a film terrified of imagination. It speaks to children but gestures toward adults. It dreams of magic but builds it on spreadsheets. For its intended teenage audience, it offers easy morals instead of wonder, spectacle instead of sincerity. As cinema, it's hollow. As art, it's afraid. In another universe, a hand-drawn, fearless, rhythmically pulsing universe, Wicked might have lived. As an anime, it could have embodied the trembling uncertainty of adolescence, the ache of belonging, the beauty of being different. Instead, this version glitters and dies beneath its own reflection. On the cultural danger of simplified diversity. The real danger of Wicked lies not in its fantasy, but in its pretense of moral depth. The film disguises simplicity as virtue. It presents difference as something to be celebrated, provided it is cute, photogenic, and harmless. But we do not live in a world of emerald fairylands. We live in cities like New York, Los Angeles, London, multicultural, multilingual, multicolored ecosystems where identity is not an accessory but a battlefield. In such a world, reducing the struggle of being different to a skin tone and a catchy song is not just shallow, it's irresponsible. Teenagers between the ages of 10 and 16 inhabit two worlds at once: the interior realm of dreams and imagination, and the brutal outer world of hierarchy, exclusion, and coded prejudice. Wicked pretends to speak to that duality, yet it sanitizes it into fantasy. Elphaba's green skin becomes a metaphor drained of reality. It is diversity without danger, rebellion without risk. The film's message of acceptance sounds noble, but it carries a hidden toxin. It teaches young viewers that the world will forgive their difference as long as they smile while being misunderstood. That is not empowerment. That is assimilation with glitter. A truly honest story about adolescence and identity in a plural society would not paint difference in musical hues. It would confront the violence of belonging, the loneliness, the split between inner truth and outer performance. Wicked turns that psychological storm into Broadway choreography, and in doing so, it betrays the very generation it pretends to inspire. The following sections appear to be a detailed continuation re-emphasis of the critique, structured as if they were originally separate essays or deeper dives. Wicked, Part 1, A Fairy Tale. Drowned in its own glitter, recap and deep dive. Jon M. Choose Wicked. Part 1 is not a film. It's a high-budget Broadway souvenir, an over-polished hallucination where imagination goes to die. This isn't wickedness. It's cowardice wrapped in confetti. 1. The empty spell of live action. There's a peculiar irony in adapting Wicked. Choose World is too clean to feel magical, too calculated to feel alive. Every frame glistens with production value, but not with soul. 2. A coming-of-age story that never comes of age. Elphaba is a metaphor robbed of its mystery. Elphaba does not commit evil. She exposes it. Her rebellion is not corruption. It is conscience misread as chaos. Philosophical theme. the failure to understand evil. Every retelling of The Wizard of Oz carries an implicit philosophical burden. What is evil and who decides it? Choose adaptation strips that complexity away. Evil here is not a social construct. It is a wardrobe choice. True moral storytelling lives in discomfort, in the space where good, intentions and destructive acts coexist. Wicked, Part 1 cleanses that space. Its world is morally sanitized. There is no genuine confrontation with the possibility that the oppressed might, in fighting evil, become capable of it themselves. In philosophical terms, the film collapses the dialectic between being judged and becoming monstrous. But in this film, conformity is rewarded, rebellion is prettified, and evil is neatly outsourced to authority. This is not wickedness, it's moral convenience. The cultural danger of simplified diversity, revisited. The real danger of Wicked lies not in its fantasy, but in its pretense of moral depth. The film disguises simplicity as virtue, reducing the struggle of being different to a skin tone and a catchy song is not just shallow, it's irresponsible. Wicked pretends to speak to the duality of adolescence, yet sanitizes it into fantasy. It is diversity without danger, rebellion without risk. The film's message of acceptance sounds noble, but it carries a hidden toxin. It teaches young viewers that the world will forgive their difference as long as they smile while being misunderstood. That is not empowerment. That is assimilation with glitter. A truly honest story would confront the violence of belonging. Wicked turns that psychological storm into Broadway choreography, and in doing so, it betrays the very generation it pretends to inspire. The producer's miscalculation. From political allegory to green-skinned musical, the failure of Wicked, Part 1 begins with the decision to make this story into a mainstream studio musical. They discovered too late that Maguire's Wicked was never designed to sing. It was built to provoke. The book's moral complexity, its dark political satire, all of it stood in direct opposition to the logic of a billion-dollar family franchise. By the time the studio finished sanding off every sharp edge, the story's teeth were gone. What was once a parable about power and language became a theme park fable about friendship and eyeliner. Adaptation is not transcription. To adapt means to transform, to translate the soul of a work, not its costume. The result is a paradox, a film obsessed with the idea of difference, made by a system terrified of it. Narrative hollow, how wicked. Part 1 fails as storytelling. The tragedy is that it misunderstands story. Its makers built a castle of emerald, glass on the ruins of a novel that was never meant to be a fairy tale. Gregory Maguire's Wicked is a parable about language, silence, and power. To adapt it faithfully would require a screenwriter with the courage to preserve its ambiguity. The film does none of these things. It amputates the brain and keeps the smile. 1. The anatomy of a broken story. At its core, Wicked. Part 1 is a script that confuses structure with scaffolding. There is a beginning, middle, and end, but no movement. The story doesn't build, it drifts. Good storytelling demands transformation through conflict. Not decorative opposition, but the kind that scars the soul. Choose Elphaba simply grows louder. The film mistakes noise for drama. Where a writer might show internal contradiction, the screenplay supplies choreography. The audience never enters Elphaba's mind. We only witness her lighting effects. That's not narrative. That's pageantry. 2. The Lost Allegory. In Maguire's book, the regime strips intelligent animals, with a capital A, of their right to speak. Elphaba's awakening is ethical, not aesthetic. She realizes that silence equals complicity. The film deletes this entire architecture. There are no animals, no linguistic genocide, no philosophical subtext. Elphaba's awakening, stripped of context, becomes personal melodrama. I'm different, and that's okay. That is not the same story. It is the story of a brand campaign, not a moral revolution. 3. The green metaphor reduced to cosmetics. In the novel, Elphaba's green skin is a symbol of alienation, a visible mutation of conscience. The film turns that symbolism into branding. Representation is not storytelling. To represent is to display. To narrate is to transform. The irony is painful. A story about rejecting spectacle becomes an act of spectacle itself. 4. The producer's miscalculation. The producers chose a story designed to interrogate power, then demanded it, entertain the powerful. They followed Maguire's book step by step, only to realize that every step forward demanded another erasure. The animals, too dark. The moral ambiguity, too confusing. That's not adaptation. That's lobotomy. They built a world safe for consumption, a sanitized Oz where no one bleeds, no one truly suffers, and no one changes. To make a story universal, they stripped it of the very truth that made it human, and in doing so, they achieved what every authoritarian regime dreams of, a world where even dissent must rhyme. 4. Adaptation without transformation. Choose Wicked mistakes transcription for transformation. It recites the events of the book without translating its conscience. Maguire's novel breathes because it questions itself. Every scene trembles with uncertainty. The film is the opposite, confident, static, self-congratulatory. When adaptation forgets transformation, what remains is simulation, the shell of story without its spirit. 6. The writer's lesson. For students of storytelling, Wicked, Part 1 should be studied, not for inspiration but as a warning. Writers must remember, a story that fears discomfort cannot reveal truth. When a story erases its own danger, it erases its humanity. And when cinema trades imagination for brand safety, it becomes a museum of dead ideas, polished, profitable, and hollow. A final strike. Wicked. Part 1 is a tragedy of cowardice disguised as color. A story born from moral unrest has been embalmed in music and marketed as empowerment. Its producers confused adaptation with obedience. Its writers mistook performance for emotion. And its audience is left with a souvenir instead of a soul. As writers, we should not envy such films. We should outgrow them. Because storytelling at its core is not about comfort. It is about truth, spoken even when forbidden. This version maintains every single sentence from your original, input while using formatting to delineate the arguments, clearly for an auditory presentation.